All right. Hey, we've got another treat for you tonight, and you're gonna absolutely love this speaker. And we appreciate him taking time on Tuesday night to come and talk to you and share some wisdom with you and some experience that he's got as a political figure. The Honorable Van Hilleary is an 8th generation Tennessean. He grew up in Ray County in East Tennessee and is a graduate of the University of Tennessee with a Bachelor of Science degree majoring in banking. He attended the University of Tennessee on a 4-year Air Force scholarship, ROTC scholarship, and graduated from UT. After he graduated, he entered the U.S. Air Force, becoming a navigator on a C-130 aircraft. After active duty, he joined the Air Force Reserve and entered law school at the Cumberland School of Law at Samford University in Birmingham, Alabama. The day after his law school graduation, he left for the Persian Gulf on the first of 2 volunteer tours of duty in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. While deployed to the Persian Gulf, he earned 2 air medals, the Kuwait Liberation Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, and the Southwest Asia Service Medal. In 1992, Hillary ran unsuccessfully for Tennessee State Senate in Tennessee's 12th senatorial district. In 1994, Hillary ran successfully for the United States Congress in Tennessee's 4th congressional district, a 22-county congressional district that at the time ran from Hardin County in West Tennessee all the way to Hamlin County in East Tennessee. While in Congress, he served on the Armed Forces Committee and the Budget Committee, where he was a strong supporter of our military and where he helped balance the federal budget for 4 consecutive years. Thank you for that. And the only time the federal budget has been balanced in the last 65 years. In 2002, after 8 years in the House of Representatives, Hillary ran for governor of Tennessee on an anti-income tax and pro-education platform, but barely lost to national mayor Bill Bredesen in the closest race for governor in Tennessee since the 1800s. In 2018, he accepted a position with his longtime friend and newly elected Congressman John Rose as his congressional chief of staff, where he proudly serves today in Washington when Congress is in session and in Tennessee out of the Gallatin, Tennessee office when Congress is in recess. Hillary lives in Hendersonville, Tennessee with his wife of 25 years, Meredith, and their 4 children. Boys State delegates, Van Hillary.
Y'all know him very well. I hope that's not going to do that all night. Colonel Reed is a real hero. He's a real patriot. You know, retired full colonel in the Army National Guard, very active in American Legion. One of my favorites. I got to know him because he was teaching a class, and he actually invited me to help teach a little bit citizenship in the nation, a merit badge class that my son was in. So anyway, I've known you for a long time, and thank you very much for that. I also want to thank the American Legion, which I'm a proud lifetime member, and Tennessee Tech for sponsoring Boys State each year. It might be Boys State, and y'all are so fortunate to be here. Boys State is really the best program of its kind anywhere in the state. And my hat's off to all the organizations, all the sponsors, all the individuals who make this possible for you to attend. I want you all to give a big round of applause for Paul Burns. As was mentioned, my name is Van Hillary. Now, while I was a U.S. Congressman for 8 years in the past, I'm currently Chief of Staff to another U.S. Congressman John Rose, who represents Putnam County, where we are now. But he couldn't be here tonight because of conflict. So technically and primarily, I'm here to speak in his stead since he couldn't be here. But he did ask me to convey very sincerely how much he regrets not being able to be here. He was here in this very speaking slot with your predecessors a year ago, but couldn't make it this year. So, he was given the topic to speak on of something that says, quote, leadership at the next level, serving Tennesseans, unquote. And they said that I could have a little latitude from that, but it's okay because I wasn't actually John Rose speaking it, but actually that's such a general topic, it kind of allows me to speak on anything I want. So that's what I'm going to do. But the first thing that comes to mind when I think about that subject is that fact that just by the fact that y'all have chosen to attend American Legion Boys State, you've already stepped up to the next level on your leadership journey in life. You were selected in large part to attend this tremendous program because you're young men who represent the very best leadership potential in the state. Now, I don't want to blow smoke up your skirt the whole time, and I'm sure everybody said that to you a lot, but it's just a fact. You represent the best leadership potential in our state for your age group. And so I hope you will optimize your opportunity here. As you may know, Congressman Rose, my boss, is originally from Cookeville. And he represents, as was said, Tennessee's 6th congressional district, which includes 19 counties, including Putnam County. As you may also know, he has announced that he's going to be running for Tennessee's next governor. Now, we don't know yet whether he'll be elected or not, but so far he's the only one that's officially announced. But that, whatever happens, that is his personal next level on his journey of being a leader who serves Tennessee. Well, there's a lot of ways to lead and a lot of ways to serve your fellow Tennesseans. And frankly, many of the best ways to serve do not involve being elected to public office. But some do. Everyone's leadership journey is different, and there's no right way or wrong way, per se, to prepare to be a good servant leader. But in my opinion, there are usually at least a couple of things that act as a common thread when you're talking about such a preparation. First, you need to sufficiently train yourself and educate yourself for whatever leadership role you would like to attain. And second, I think it's important as you go on this journey of leadership through your life that you seek out interim ways to lead and serve, to gain experience along the way as you work your way towards your ultimate, whatever your ultimate goal is, in leadership or in life. All that said, let me describe one such successful journey, even though there's no right or wrong one, but one such successful journey that I'm very familiar with. Congressman John Rose. His leadership journey started when he was in high school, where he was a leader in FFA, where he served as a state FFA officer in Tennessee. He then attended and graduated from Tennessee Tech, which he's very proud of, where he ran for student government president, but he didn't win. He came in second, but he didn't win. But he, like everyone I know, learned a lot from his loss. One always learns more from your losses than from your wins. It's just kind of a truism in life. Then he received a master's degree in agricultural economics from Purdue and a law degree from Vanderbilt University. Now, after practicing law for 1 year, really a little less than a year, he and a buddy of his from law school who had an idea about a software product decided to start a business. And they started that software business from scratch, and 9 years later sold it for an incredible amount of money, millions and millions of dollars. Starting and operating a successful business, which provides jobs and otherwise contributes to the economic well-being of our communities, by the way, is in of itself a great way to provide service. But the financial independence that his successful business accorded to him also gave him the freedom to serve Tennessee in many other ways. Chief among them during that time was that he served as Tennessee's Commissioner of Agriculture. Then in 2018, he ran for Congress, and this year he's running for governor. You already heard some of the highlights of my journey in that overly generous introduction. You said it just like I wrote it, by the way. Thank you for not leaving any of those nice things out. Let's see, now I lost my spot. You've already heard about it from him, from Colonel Reed, so I'm not going to repeat them, but I do want to describe to you a little bit about what it's actually like to be a U.S. Congressman, both the good parts and the bad parts. In my view, there's a couple, as far as your official duties, there's a couple of ways to divide it up. One section you'd say, what you do in Tennessee. What you do in Tennessee when you're here, not in Washington. and what you do to provide direct constituent service to nearly 800,000 constituents that you represent. And the other part of it is what you do in Washington, D.C., and I'm talking about how you vote. When you fight for or fight against or support legislation, and when you eventually craft your own legislation. And between those two sections of what you do on your official duties, some would say that what you do in Washington is arguably a little more exciting, maybe a little more sexy. But for my money, what you do in your congressional district for your constituents is day in and day out more satisfying. There's some exceptions to both those rules, of course. You get to help people in Tennessee that you represent with all kinds of things. Maybe someone served in the Korean War and they never did get the medals that they had earned in combat. Well, you can help them get those. Maybe an older constituent didn't get their Social Security check, and it's like their lifeblood if you're that age for so many senior citizens in the country. We're able to dislodge that check and get it to them pretty quickly. Maybe someone needs to quickly replace a passport that they lost, and they've already paid for the trip overseas, but now if they don't go, they lose all that money. But they can't go without the passport. We have the ability to usually get it replaced pretty quickly. Maybe Tennessee Tech needs a little money, a little grant money to help fund a startup of a new nuclear engineering program. Well, that actually happened. But let me just give you one other story, and I'll get off of this. But this is very sad. This was a very satisfying part of the job to me. There was a woman that came to me from, I won't tell the county because I don't want to really identify this woman, but she came to me one time and she says, it's a terrible story. She said, these are my two grandchildren. And their father was killed by their mother one time. She decided she just didn't want to be married anymore. She just blew his head off. And the kids were right there. And then she went to jail, but then she got it overturned on a technicality, and she was re-convicted of not just second-degree murder, not the harshest murder charge of conviction. And she only had to serve 5 years if she had good behavior. And she didn't mess up in any other way when she was in prison. So she was coming out for parole. And she came to me and said, look, their mother's about to get parole, and if she does, they will get custody of these children away from me. And so then the mother that blew the head off of their dad that they saw that's who they're going to be raised by, and they're just not going to be right. They're not going to have a real chance at life. It's going to be emotionally stifling to them or worse. So I got busy. That's not really a federal issue. But I got busy because she moved me emotionally so much. And we found out that yes, three ways can be you can have your parole denied. You're not behaving in jail, and your crime is not too heinous. I thought that was pretty heinous, but apparently it wasn't heinous enough to keep her in jail. And then the last one was the community to which you would be paroled doesn't want her. They put up a fight and say we don't want her. Well, that's the only thing I had control over. So I got this woman interviews on TV stations. I got her interviews on radio stations. And we generated so many cards and letters and telegrams into the parole board that kept her in jail. And I'll just tell you, it was pretty satisfying. Pretty satisfying. So, anyway, in each one of those cases, you make a real material difference in people's lives. And you're the one that gets the satisfaction from that. You get the satisfaction because you actually see fruition to your efforts. It's just very cool. Now, your work in Washington, on the other hand, is much different. You go up there kind of, and I say this metaphorically, but you go up there kind of, in fact, the best ones, I think, in Congress, Republican and Democrat, go up there, save the world, metaphorically speaking. At least they want to save their little piece of it. And what they find out, though, is that you're never quite able to save the world, even if you keep trying. The reality is, I'm going to use a football metaphor here, the reality is that you spend most of your time in Washington, D.C. and Congress between the 40-yard lines. And your whole world up there kind of ends up being about field position. Every once in a while, you get past the 40-yard line and you score points. You actually get into the end zone. But those times are pretty few and far between. It's mostly just tug of war. And you also know that you might spend years gaining just a few yards going in the direction you think the country ought to go in. But then you also know that the other team's going to get the ball and moves it right back in the direction you think the country should not go in. It's just kind of frustrating. Sometimes I had this discussion with Fred Thompson one time. Y'all might know who Fred Thompson is. He's deceased now. He was an actor and was a pretty famous senator from Tennessee. And we both agreed that it was just like beating your head against the wall in D.C. sometimes, because it takes so long to get anything done. My boss, Congressman Rhodes, has been trying to get a bill through the Financial Services Committee, on which he sits, has broad bipartisan support. Everybody's for it except for just 2 or 3 people on that committee, and they've had it bottled up for 2 years. Anyway, when your wins do come, though, I'll tell you, it's pretty doggone glorious. It's like, it may not mean much to you, but when Colonel Reed mentioned that we balanced 4 budgets when I was there, and it's the only federal budgets that have been balanced in 65 years, that's atrocious. Anybody know what the national debt is right now?
26 trillion.
36 trillion.
Y'all got it. Pushing 37, it's 36 point something, pushing $37 trillion. That's nuts. That's nutball money. That's crazy, Bill. Guess who's going to pay it back? We're spending your inheritance right now. And one of the things I really can't stand is when a politician, I don't care what party they're from, when a politician comes back and they brag about all this stuff they got for their district or their state, and they didn't lift one finger to try to balance the budget so that y'all are not charged for that while we're enjoying it right now. Yeah, I think it's cowardly. But for 4 straight years, we balanced the budget, and I would say that was kind of a good thing. But those wins just don't come very often. And one of the reasons is because there's 1,000 different ways to stop legislation from passing. It's got to go through many, many, many bottlenecks to pass, but it only has to get stopped by one of them to not pass. It's just a difficult thing to do, and the Founding Fathers set it up that way. They wanted to make it difficult. But in spite of all that, I'm going to tell you this. I think it's a worthwhile endeavor. Just my opinion. Because think about this. If the good people don't go try to do that, and whether it's Congress or the legislature or anything, if the good people don't try to do it, who does that lead it to? The not so good people, bad people. And the next thing you know, the country's really not going in the direction we ought to go in, and we're going to change the country for the worse and maybe forever. So it's a worthy cause. It's a worthwhile aspiration. It's a worthwhile job to have. Now, there's one other little aspect of the job that I want to mention. It's not official duties, but it goes with it if you're an elected public service. And that's the dreaded politics. Some would say the ugly underbelly of elected public service is politics. It's not all ugly, but sometimes it gets that way. One of the things you have to do, one of the burdens you bear if you're in elected public office, is you have to raise an insane amount of money every time you run for election. I hate raising money. I hate asking someone else for money. It just goes against every piece of my DNA. But if you don't do it, you get your head beat in on TV, and you're turned into something your mother wouldn't even recognize or vote for on TV if you don't have money to fight back. So you have to spend a tremendous amount of time raising money. It's not the way it maybe ought to be, but that's the way it is. But here's another funny thing that you probably never think about. You end up having to do a lot of things that you probably wouldn't do normally if you weren't in public office. To build political capital, what some people call goodwill, not only to get reelected, but also to do the job like it ought to be done. And there's various ways you can do that. It just depends on your situation. What I'm talking about, to kind of make a real simple example, if you went to your mother and you said, "Mom, I want to volunteer to clean up the house, including vacuuming the whole house." Now, if she didn't fall over dead from that shock of you saying that, you probably earned some goodwill from your mom, right? For volunteering to do that. And in doing so, you might be able to trade it in for something. Maybe you could trade it in for a later curfew on Saturday night. Maybe you can trade it in for a little money for some extra popcorn at the theater. Whatever it is. But that's what I mean by goodwill, earning goodwill. Now, if you're in politics, you don't earn goodwill or political capital by doing things that are fun. You just don't get credit for that. You have to do things that are not particularly enjoyable. And I could give you a bunch of examples, but let me just give you one example from my past. How many know how to milk a cow in this room? A bunch, well, that's pretty good. I, to this day, do not know how. And I have nothing but respect for those of you who do this, and it's part of your world, part of your family's world, but let me tell you, I was tasked one time to go into what was called a celebrity cow milking contest. And when I say celebrities, I don't mean big-time celebrities, I mean little-time celebrities like me, the sheriff, people like that. It was Dairy Day in Lincoln County. Anybody from Lincoln County here? Dairy Day in Lincoln County. They at least used to have a lot of dairy farmers there, and they had an annual Dairy Day. And the finale event, after doing all kinds of stuff all day long on the courthouse lawn, was the so-called celebrity cow milking contest. I didn't know how to milk a cow. I was dreading it, and I was right. It turned out to be the right thing. But we drew numbers, so he was going to go first. And I said, "Dear God, please let me draw a number and let me go toward the end so I could watch them pick up what they're going to do, squirrels, pick up what they're going to do, and surely I can get through this." So I got number 4 out of 4, which I thought, great. They all went up, all these other folks went up and milked the cow. They brought this cow on this gazebo. Y'all got a very pretty courthouse square in Fayetteville, the county seat of Lincoln County. They brought this cow out of this gazebo. They put about 200 or 300 fold-out chairs and people on the courthouse lawn to watch all this. The local cable TV guy was the MC of this contest, and he's recording it for his next day cable show, unfortunately. Anyway, my time came. All the other people got milk. I sat down on a little wooden stool. And I'm just milking away. I'm not going to try to do it because I think it's kind of a perverted thing to do to the cow. So. But, once again, with all respect for the people who do it, I just didn't enjoy it. I just didn't find it a very pleasant thing. But I was doing this in part because I wanted to build political capital, because I knew one of the hits against me was that, and I was a Republican that I was in a district that never had a Republican in it. They had Democrats since Reconstruction. I'm not making one of their judgment, I'm just telling you facts. And so they were going to come after me saying I was just a rich country club Republican and we need somebody different who could relate to us. And so I was trying to prove to people that I was not that I was just an everyday guy. I did the same things they did every day, but I didn't know how to milk a cow. And I was proving to them I didn't know how to do it. I was not like them, and I was having a very unpleasant experience, and I thought this was really bad. So I'm getting no milk, and I'm doing exactly what other people did. I'm doing exactly where they did it, and not a drop. It's like a desert down there with that cow. So then I begin to panic. I said, okay, I've got to try something else because this time's running out. And I did what could be described as an experimentation phase on that cow, trying this technique or that technique, just trying to see what would work. And it didn't take long before the cow got really pissed off at me. The cow's got, and I want to tell you how the cow showed her angst. She showed it in what could be described a gastrointestinal way. Repeatedly. So here I am on this little wooden stool. This cow standing on this concrete floor gazebo. And the cow is taking a dump about every 3 seconds. And that stuff's hitting that concrete. What's it doing, man? Boom. Boom. And I'm getting showered after wave of this stuff. And now there's a little snicker in the crowd because they're checking this out too. They're going, oh, look at that. That's pretty funny. And I'm thinking this is the worst moment of my entire life. And then it got a little bit worse, hard to believe. And this is how it got worse. So this guy on the front row of those fold-out chairs elbowed his buddy next to him and said, just loud enough for everybody to hear, and I'm going to have to quote him. I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but you'll see why I have to quote him. He says, look at that old boy up there. He's milking the shit out of that cow. So you can do your job like it ought to be done. You don't need to have to vote in fear of losing your re-election all the time. You want to vote because that's the right thing to do. And you want to have some political capital, political goodwill there so you can cash it in when those votes come along. I'll give you an example of a couple of those votes. Probably one of the toughest votes you take is that when the leadership from up on high of the Congress writes a bill behind closed doors, and then they give it to you. It's about that thick, maybe 1,000 pages. And they give it to you the day before you have to vote on it, and say, vote on it tomorrow. And you really don't have time to read it all. But you do the best you can, and you divide it up. And you let your staff have some of it, you read some of it, and eventually you probably are able to read enough of it to say, okay, well, there's a lot of good stuff in that bill, there's a lot of bad stuff in that bill. Now, how do I vote? And if you're from a tough congressional district or a tough state, purple state, one that can go either way in any given election cycle, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because however you vote, you're either voting for the good stuff and for the bad stuff, or against the bad stuff and against the good stuff. Either way, that 30-second attack ad from your opposition writes itself, and you can expect to see it later that year. A slightly worse situation is you get a big old thick bill, it's got 1,000 pages. They say, read it, you're voting on it tomorrow. And you read it, and you determine that it's a good bill for the country, but it's a bad bill for your district. That's a tough vote, man. That is a tough vote. And if you go with your country, oddly enough, kind of counterintuitively, if you go with your country over your district, the 30-second attack ad writes itself. So this building of political capital, people do it in different ways. But I gave you a sort of a cattle-milking story. But every member of Congress, whether you hate them or don't, everybody seems to like their own congressman who hates Congress. But I will tell you that, and there's some scoundrels in Congress, some Republican, some Democrat. But most of the people in Congress are decent human beings that try to raise their kids right, try to pay their taxes, try to give you a good day's work for a day's pay. But they can all give you stories like this. It doesn't make the headlines. But whether you put it through the filter of ex-urban filter or an urban filter or a rural filter like I had, wherever they're from, they can give you a story where they bled for the cause to build political capital, to try to do the job like it should be done, and to hopefully be able to vote the right way without having to commit suicide to do it. Let me just, we've talked about how you guys are kind of special, which once again, without getting your heads too big. But when I was preparing for this, I was reminded of a verse in the chapter of Luke in the New Testament, which said, from everyone who has been given much, and I would argue that's you folks, much will be expected. And I'll tell you, I think you've been, you wouldn't be here. Your GPA's high, your leadership gifts are potential is off the charts. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't been given impressive gifts. You're the cream of the crop from across the state. So I hope you'll use your talents wisely to help others across the state when the time comes. And it doesn't matter how your servant leadership manifests itself. It absolutely does not need to be politics. And I want to put a little exclamation point on that by closing with a story. It was mentioned I was in Desert Storm, and I flew a C-130 as a navigator, not the pilot, unfortunately, but as a navigator. It was still a pretty fun job. I sat right behind the co-pilot. And a C-130 mission is not the most dangerous one the military ever thought of. Trust me. Our main job is to take cargo places. Sometimes we drop people out the back door at altitude, they parachute down, or jeeps out the back door, or whatever out the back door. Sometimes we land and unload it. But essentially, you're taking the beans, the bullets, the men, and the material from point A to point B. But on occasion, you also are an airback mission, airplane. So you get wounded soldiers out from an unimproved dirt strip in the middle of nowhere, which we did in Saudi Arabia, the Mexican-Kuwaiti border. And sometimes those soldiers make it, sometimes they don't. And it made a emotional impression upon me. And I remember thinking, man, I'm doing my part, but that guy in the back's giving it to office. I've got to go back. Got to go back and do something to make his life most worthwhile. And I didn't know what it was going to be, but that's what I resolved to do. Didn't know if it'd be start a business and create jobs. Didn't know if this was going to be president of the Rotary Club. Didn't know what it was going to teach or whatever. I'd go back and do something. It just so happened that we were trying to put in a state income tax in Tennessee at the time, and I thought that was wrong, and I ran for state senate and lost. But it doesn't really matter what you do. I would just admonish you to take your talents and put them to use. Put them to use not only for yourself, but for society, for your fellow Tennesseans as you go through. There's one other quote that I like that I really will finish with. And it's one of my favorite presidents, Theodore Roosevelt. You've probably heard it before, but he says, "It is not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the other man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man in the arena."
So, once again, we've got a few minutes for some Q&A, and Hillary's been gracious enough to stay here, answer a few of your questions. And so we've got about, I know the schedule's at 8 o'clock, we've got about 10 or 15 minutes, maybe about 10 minutes, and we'll check the time. And what we're doing next is they're doing tug of war between the cities.
Okay.
And it's outside, it's nice and wet.
It
So
sounds like an arena to me.
remember, the man in the arena, that's an awesome poem, I love it. State your name, the city you're from, and then your question clearly.
My name is James Derrick. I'm representing Drennan City. My hometown is Chattanooga, Tennessee. My question is, what do you do as chief of staff when you personally disagree with what Congressman Rose is doing?
I sleep smartly and carry it out, but not before a robust conversation behind closed doors. And I made that deal with him. He asked me to be his chief of staff, not the other way around, and I'm not suggesting I've done him a favor. He's an excellent congressman and a good friend. That's the reason I did it. I've known him forever. And I tried to get him to run for Congress forever, and he finally did it, and then he won, and essentially said, "Now you got me in this mess, I want you to help me out." And then there's more to it. So I told him I'd do it 2 years, and I said, if we still like each other after 2 years, I'll consider staying longer if you want to. So that was 6.5 years ago, and at the time I said, hey, if I do this, I will recognize you're the one at the top of the organization chart, not me. And it was tough because when we first started, people would come in and call me congressman instead of him. On occasion, they even asked to have a picture with me and I said, no. But that all corrected itself over a couple of years. But anyway, once we get outside the doors, and also, by the way, there's plenty of ways to sandbag a member of Congress. That's one of the things I've learned as the chief of staff. I'm appalled to learn how easy it is to manipulate the decision-making of a member of Congress by the senior staff if they choose to do so. I'm appalled because I don't know if that ever happened to me, and I suspect it may have. But I've taken a hard line on it, and I fired people for that because they thought they were the congressman, they were the chief of staff. And I said, when you put your name on the ballot, when you take the slings and the arrows on social media, you raise the money, then you get to decide. If you don't, you carry it out. And I would not let them slow walk in the back. You get it.
How you doing? I'm Andrew Painter, and I'm from Memphis, Tennessee.
I've heard of it. Go ahead.
My question is, so a lot of us here want to go to RTC or go into the military. So your experience with that, going to RTC at UT Knox and then going to Air Force, how did that prepare you, and how did you transition from that to being an elected position in the Tennessee government?
Well, that's a strong experience changed me. I wasn't expecting it. To be honest, I'd never been in politics in my life. I didn't know what I was doing when I got in. Part of why I lost my first race. But it prepared me to, I think, for a life of I'm no saint. I mean, I don't spend every moment of every day trying to be servant oriented or whatever, but I think that's been a big part of my life. And so it kind of made me focus on that a lot more than I think I would have. So,
I'm Tony Davis, representing Watson City. You mentioned the amount of debt that we're in. How did we get there, and how can we better that?
cowardly politicians. Uh-oh. Cowardly politicians. Politicians have one thing they do well. They overpromise and underdeliver. It is our stock and trade. We don't like to tell people no, so we say yes, even if we can't afford to say yes. We say yes to a lot of things we can't afford. And used to be the Republicans were a little bit better on this. Now I don't see much difference. Both sides are spending. And here's an ugly thing, an ugly fact. During COVID, during times of real serious crisis, I'm not talking about garden variety, I'm talking about serious crisis. World War II, COVID pandemic, things like that. Yeah, we have to spend more money, and we don't always have to borrow some of it to spend to get through it. But during COVID, they increased the amount of spending in the federal government by 50% over about a year and a half or so. Then after COVID went away, they left the spending level at exactly the same place. It's nuts. It's just not right. And so that's how it got that way. And it's hard to balance the budget. It's easy to run a credit card, hard to pay it down. And that's why, I'm proud of those balanced budgets. It shouldn't be such a landmark thing, a balanced budget. It should be like every day, standard operating procedure, but it's not. And it's awful. And it affects everything. It affects everything. The interest on the debt this year was about $1 trillion. It's nuts. That doesn't go to school, it doesn't go to anything. Get the men in uniform, and women in uniform, better equipment so they have a safer chance of surviving from a conflict. Then just go out. That's all. That's how we do it. And it's hard to pay down, but we can't pay it down. I'm sorry, but we can't pay it down. We just got to pay it off. Obviously, y'all been told you got to clap and everything. You don't really have to, as far as I'm concerned. I know my speech. These answers are golden nuggets of wisdom, but there may be some of them. Go ahead, please. Sorry I said it. Yes, sir.
Hello, Mr. Van Hilleary.
Yeah.
My name is Armand Sheikh. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, particularly in the Franklin area. And my question to you is, what inspired you to get involved in government and politics, and what advice would you have for young individuals seeking to pursue a career in state government, not only state government, but also the federal government?
Well, so one great thing about it, I think I kind of said what motivated me. It was this experience I had in the storm, but there's not any special motivation. Everybody can be motivated by different things. I will say this, the difference between state government and federal government, among the obvious ones, is that if you're in your legislature, and I know you've heard from some, right? You've heard from the state legislators. You heard from Cameron Sexton today, right? He used to work for me, though, before he got in the big time. But you can have another life besides politics if you're a state legislator, you've got a real job somewhere else. It's not 24/7 all the time. And so you can live in Tennessee, which is a big plus. I commute. I live here, but I have to commute up there a lot. And it's a great place to visit. It's not a good place to live. So that's a difference. It allows you to be sort of a citizen legislator as opposed to kind of a full-time one. I think it's a great thing. And I often wonder how my life would have changed, what different direction it would have taken had I won that state senate race. By the way, on the election night in 1992, it was announced that I won that state senate race, and then overnight they found some ballots, or some boxes of votes in Overton County, but I hate to be Overton. Anyway, and the next morning I had lost. But had I won, I think I would have been a whole different But I encourage you to do that, that's what you will do. And I'll be watching from you in the future.
So a question I had, since it's been a point of debate in our different party meetings and even collective, there is a lot of division in our country between Democrats and Republicans, left and right. So with you having such a rich career in the military, Congress, and where you're at now, what would you say about how we as future leaders can help mend that fight?
There's a difference between being tough and being mean. A lot of politicians don't understand that. You ought to do the least amount of, in every given situation. What they tell you in Congress is that no battle is your last battle. I remember when I was a first termer, I got really, I'll just say, aggravated at a guy from Florida who lied to me about me getting a vote on a bill. One of my bills. It was an amendment, actually it was an amendment to his bill. He says, yes, I'll let you have that vote. And then we got to the floor and he didn't do it. And that's the first time somebody really double-crossed me in Congress. Wasn't the last, but first. And I was steamed, man. I'm just, it's obvious anybody around me in about a 10-yard area that I'm demonstrably upset. And anyway, so somebody from the leadership, a staffer came over to me, said, he said, this is not your last battle. And there may be a battle where you actually want him as your friend. And if you burn that bridge, even though he's screwed you here, it's not really, the net of that is not positive for you. Just file it away, know that you can't trust him. And here's the funny thing, in Congress, you find out who you can trust and who you can't pretty quickly. And luckily, you can trust a lot more folks than you can, some you cannot. Your original question is what I got off on a tangent there. Still bothering me, obviously, but.
How can we?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things is, what I did is not go off on him and just make a permanent enemy there, and just kind of let it roll off a little bit after a period of time. It's tougher these days. One of the things that makes it tougher is the internet. Like I have a daughter. It seems to affect girls more than boys in high school, but I have a daughter. Several daughters, but one of them particularly, we were at a new school and she didn't have as many old-time friends, and she had a friend group, whatever that means, but sometimes they would go out and not invite her on the weekends, and then they'd post it all on the internet, and then she felt all depressed and sad about that. Well, that's, in the big scheme of things, not a big deal. It's a big deal to her, so I get that. But you extrapolate that across the whole country and how that's the way it is in Congress, Everything is right there. And you get rewarded for outrageous behavior. On both the fringes, on both sides of the fence, people will get hundreds of small dollar donations for outrageous behavior because they'll go on the internet, they'll send an email around to people all over the country that are known to give money to people who are nuts. And they'll say, because they'll say, we're the only pure one fighting the fight. These other ones are just not really even trying. Give me money to fight the fight. Remember, did anybody watch the State of the Union address this year? Okay. So, whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, I knew it was going to be a show. And I really, as a former member, I have rights to go on the floor of the House anytime I want. So I really badly wanted to go there and watch it in person. But John Rose, who's running for governor, had kind of a high roller type person that's going to help him in the race up there as his guest at the gallery, get one guest pass. So didn't mind it, love these folks, but I was assigned to go entertain them while the speech was going on somewhere else. But you remember the guy in the State of the Union that raised his cane up and said something, I forget what it was, but it's kind of a over-the-top thing, and he wouldn't shut up. I have a strong, and I can't prove it because I didn't check it out, but I have a very strong suspicion he probably raised $1 million in donations that night from around the country. Because there's a good segment of the populace that hates Trump. So it's people give against more than they give for. So I think that was contrived, premeditated, and it happens all the time. We've got to figure out how to fix that, I think, before we get some more comedy, not comedy, but comedy in Congress. Yeah.
My name is Nico Haley.
Hey, Nico.
I live originally in Mildred, Tennessee, and I am part of Athens Inner City. Speaking of comedy, it's obviously very obvious that everybody here loves you and they think you're funny. So I did some research on you as you were talking, and I saw that you went to the United States Air Force on reserves. And I was just going to ask if you had any more funny stories that you saw before your time in government, I guess.
Funny stories? Oh gosh, there's a lot of stories. You mean military kind of things?
Yes, sir. In basic, wherever at.
I could talk to you offline about something. I don't know. I'm not coming up on right away, I'm sorry. Let me just say this in closing out. Who's running for governor in here?
I'm Nico, by the way, so.
Okay, so anyway, when I was in Boise State, I don't know if you've ever heard of a guy named Lamar Alexander. Lamar Alexander ran for governor and lost, and he ran for governor and won. Then many years later, he ran for the U.S. Senate for 2 or 3 terms. I can't remember how many. And now he's retired. But he spoke. He was the speaker when the governor's inauguration lunch, or whatever you call that. He was the speaker that day. And he made a joke about himself because he'd just come off of losing the governor's race. And he had been elected governor when he was at Boise State. Long time ago. And he made some kind of joke about it. Said, I just want you to know, turn to you or whoever else is governor. He says, I just want you to know, Joe, or whatever the guy's name was, just because you become governor of Boise State doesn't mean you become governor of anything. He later became governor. So he hadn't been then. So the last thing I'd say is that you really don't have to become governor to also have a good career in public service. I can't remember what I was, but it was pretty far down the food chain. And it was something that was very unremarkable. But I was the first seat on our tennis team in our city. We were undefeated all the way through the thing, so I got that little kudo, I guess. But I was a nothing burger when it came to my political prowess in Boise State. But I wish you and all the other folks running for governor very well. And I used to say when I was a congressman, if I can ever help you all in any way, let me know. And sometimes people will come up and want me to help them. As a lowly chief of staff, I just don't have any juice. I can't do a thing for you, but I do wish you a lot of luck. Go get them.
So, we talked earlier, I had several of you stand up if you know who I am, if you've met me before or whatever, and a handful of you have. So I met Van Hilleary a few years ago, like you said, at Mariband University, but I keep calling on him. And so it's just like I've known him all my life. Now he comes and speaks at Boise State. So I certainly appreciate it. So, you know what friends do? That's right. Friends with friends and mates life. Christian from athletics has something to say.
Well, I have seen it.